Hey folks, circle your calendars. Christmas morning, or what I like to call the Cannes unveiling, is actually happening. So June 3rd, we're going to get a bunch of titles next week. I'm Eric Lavallée, and this is Kevin Jagernauth, and we're going to delve into the Cannes Film Festival 2020 edition for the umpteenth time. So originally I was thinking this would be a whole bunch of non-essential items. I was thinking it'd be much more Cannes classics, out of competition, but Variety dropped a really interesting headline this week with a lot of titles in the grapevine, including Memoria. So at this point, let's introduce Kevin.
Hey. Yeah, it's big news. I think there's a lot of mystery, speculation about what a Cannes selection during a pandemic might look like. But from the titles that are being teased, I mean, we have The French Dispatch, we have Naomi Kawase's True Mothers, Thomas Vinterberg's Another Round. I mean, it sounds like just your average year at Cannes. I think as always, the devil will be in the details. We are expecting a 50-strong list of films. So there's a lot of ground to cover, but it's very, very promising. It means next Wednesday is going to be quite the morning, or quite the afternoon. It's going to be around 1 o'clock Eastern when that drops.
So I was delving into the suggested titles by Variety, and I noticed one key feature is that a lot of these titles are not necessarily up for grabs. Cannes is very much, the Cannes titles are very much, they're in need of critical buzz, but they're also, it's also a great way to splash your title and then pick up international sales. A lot of these films that you just mentioned have either domestic deals within their own countries. If we talk about the Winterberg title, that got picked up well in advance by several nations. And even Tai Zhou's Memoria was picked up by Neon releasing. So yeah, there's a lot of domestic distributors who are thinking of their calendar. And as City had mentioned, he is putting a stamp on titles that would normally be released this year or until May of next year.
Oh, exactly. The driving force for the selection is that there's some sort of theatrical release planned. I think the interesting thing is going to be, well, among the many interesting things, is going to be where streaming titles might end up. Like, there's been some speculation that Spike Lee's To Five Bloods will end up as counting as a selection. So is this going to be a year where we see Netflix get back into the good graces of Cannes? I mean, we'll see. And that's what does it mean for other? Point. What's that?
I said that's an interesting point.
Yeah,
sort of like segue inside and.
Yeah, exactly, and same for Amazon or whatnot. I think there's the streaming question is a very, very interesting one around this. But how do you feel about this? You must be more excited now hearing these titles than you were before.
Most definitely. What I find interesting is that I get to parse two things. Is that selection normally informs us of what we would see in Venice in a given year. Those that are not ready or were dismissed will end up being pushed to be considered for the Lido. Now, the Lido or Venice, they have their own fest going on, and we'll go into that a little bit later on. But what the selection will tell us is what films might be pushed back to 2021. B, titles like from Michael Franco, Ulrich Settel, Mia Hansen-Løve, Joel Cohen, even David Lowery. What happened to those titles? Do they get submitted to Venice? Is there a good chance that they get into Venice? Or do they get pushed into 2021 the Variety article just highlighted, obviously Verhoeven, Dumont, and Lapide were being pushed to 2021, but they also said that Carax might be going there, might be holding off, as well as Petrov's Flu. So there's a whole bunch of, it'll give us more answers, and we can speculate even more as to what Venice might look like.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's an excellent way to put it. I mean, we're going to get a lot of answer. The lineup is going to answer what's in Cannes, which will be exciting on its own. But just like every year, it opens up. It sets the stage for the rest of the year. And so, in a time when there's been a lot of talk about what the future of movies might look like, it's really hopeful. It's really nice to have this lineup. It's something to look forward to be excited about, and really paves the way. I mean, I guess we can dive into Venice now, because the word is that they're not going to collaborate with Cannes, although that was never a sure thing. What do you think about that? How do you feel about Venice going out on their own?
So when Thierry Frémaux was mentioning that that Cannes stamp would be extended to other film festivals, Venice was sort of thrown into this batch that included Telluride, that included TIFF, San Sebastian, but it was never a sure thing. If I'm Alberto and I'm still looking to hold my event, there's no way in hell that I'm going to even consider a Cannes film label in my lineup. So that's one thing to consider when thinking about the entire strategy for Venice. They probably had a lot more going for them, and Alberto did put out a communique, under the radar type thing that did get out to the trades, but he wanted to establish or figure out what the interest level was for all the producers, the production companies, the sales agencies, and whatnot. So I guess that was a positive response, and I guess they'll get some version of what they're accustomed to.
Yeah, I think he really wants to have some sort of physical version of this festival, of Venice. What it looks like is anybody's guess. I think there's so many questions now. Um, there's still a lot of questions about what the fall festival looks like, but it does look like if Cannes has their selection, Venice is going to have theirs, and what that looks like, how that plays out, remains to be seen. At least with Cannes, we already know there's no festival, so they are stamping these films as official selections, which helps them later on. Whether this is the same scenario Venice is going to play, it'll be interesting. I'm not sure. They're an important festival, certainly one of the top three, no doubt. But they still don't have that same cachet as the Cannes laurels in front of a film.
Well, I think Parasite sort of like equaled the loss of Roma, and I think they'll forever be competitive. And in a given year, Cannes did technically lose out in the fisticuffs with Venice. What I find interesting is, along with the Cannes news, is that the Critics Week in Cannes will also be unveiling their selection. And so I'm thinking about the smaller titles, the national cinema, the French titles. And in this week, they had mentioned that the Venice Days, which is sort of like the equivalent to the Director's Fortnight, are also still at it. But I was thinking about those titles that would make up part of that fabric. And what exactly does it mean for a film that gets traction at Venice, but then is stuck in a situation where they might spend an entire year where they don't get those extra festival plays and aren't able to go to Rotterdam necessarily, or even films in the first and second quarters of the following year?
It's an excellent question. I think more than ever this year, for Cannes and Venice, The selections are going to be about helping films that, as we mentioned, may only have maybe local distribution deals in place. Enable those conversations to keep going to get pickup elsewhere. So even if a Cannes or Venice Days or a Critics Week film doesn't really have anything set up outside of France or Italy or wherever, I think the mere suggestion, it allows that sales agent to say, hey, look, this was selected, this has validity, and it gets distributors, people who are in acquisitions to at least watch it, to at least
Mhm.
consider it. So I think that's where these things are going to be really important. And just a thought on Venice, as we talking about this, I think it'll also be interesting to see what the American film split is between Cannes and Venice. There's a lot of big American titles this year that need a place to launch, that need a home. And it'll be interesting to see how Cannes relaxes their rules for this, and how much Venice opens their arms even more to sort of Hollywood and those kind of awards films.
I think one thing's for certain is that the festival, and we've talked about this prior in other episodes, is that there will indeed be less movies. There will be less talent. There's just going to be less people in general. So I think the selection of those titles, I think it's just going to add that much more oomph to them. It's going to add much more weight. So outside the competition, I don't even see how you can program the Horizonte section necessarily, or even their version of the classics. I think it's going to be a really lean, mean edition. But the big question for me is, do they have a parachute plan in place in case the COVID situation just aggravates and gets worse? So I think we can move along to our next topic. Since we're still talking about film festivals, Ann Thompson at IndieWire, she sort of got the 411 on the situation with Netflix. Netflix, as you know, just had a fantastic quarter. It benefited them tremendously in terms of just viewership and subscribership. And they're looking at the long game for their prestige titles. And Venice might actually not be in the plans. How do you think their decision, actually, let's go into the decision. What was their decision?
Yeah, no, they've decided, as of now anyway, to bypass the festival circuit this year. And to me, it's a bold move, but it almost makes a weird kind of sense. I mean, where traditional Hollywood studios, outside of a couple, don't have a platform to put their films on, Netflix has the platform, and they own theaters in New York and LA.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we might see is Netflix go like a very old school kind of awards approach. They get select press in New York and LA to be the first people to see these films, which includes, let's talk about them quickly. The David Fincher's Mank is the big one.
Mm-hmm.
Ron Howard's Hillbilly Elegy, Charlie Kaufman's I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And by doing this, they have much more control over the narrative of a film than you would out of a film festival, where it premieres and it's just a deluge of tweets and first reactions and, very reactive processing of the film. Whereas here, if they can select their press and do it in a controlled way, they can really get these films out there the way they want and manage these releases. So I think it's bold and savvy, frankly. I think it's an interesting move.
My question to you is, why is it important to make, I mean, they didn't put out a press release. Ann Thompson went and gathered this info, but why make a definite statement now? Are they trying to influence potentially the Oscar race and to further push on the higher ups to consider prolonging the season, therefore giving maximum time to every single title, much like they'll do with Spike's film, where Spike's is gonna the Five Bloods will be released in June, but I get a sense that we'll be talking about it for a good month.
I don't think they're trying to enforce change on a broader level. I mean, whatever Netflix does, everyone watches what they do. Um, I think for them, like, imagine it's such a weird year that in an ordinary festival year, you're always battling for attention. I think this year more than ever, the selections of each fest are you're going to have, even because they'll be smaller, it'll be a smaller number of films battling harder for that spotlight. And I
Mm-hmm.
think by doing this, Netflix is just saying, you know what, we have our films, we have our platform, we have our cinemas. We're going to roll these out the way we feel comfortable, so that we can control when these, like, imagine if say David Fincher's Mank, it's either premiered at TIFF, whatever TIFF turns out to be, among, let's say, 20 other titles, and you're just lost in that scrum of 3 weeks of press coverage, or you just wait till like late October, not much happening, and then you have all of the movie world's attention on your one film. It's not a bad way to go.
Well, I know Cameron Bailey has gone to bat for them and gave them just last year like tremendous theatrical or gala releases. They had the Scotiabank where they couldn't play any of those titles, so they pitched they pitched tent in great venues. So, and those venues are massive. So even with social distancing in place, I'm sure Cameron Bailey is having like a little arm wrestling match with them, and hoping that some of these titles do populate whatever edition they manage to put out. Moving along, so another heavyweight or somebody that's trying to make their place in the streaming world is Apple TV. They just launched this year. And they've boarded Martin Scorsese's next feature and played a card that Netflix did with his last feature. So pretty big headline in terms of saving a project. So just to put in context, is Killers of the Flower Moon was sort of like in pre-production. They were landscaping, they were scouting. I remember seeing a picture of Martin, sort of like looking at the Omaha landscape, and I guess Paramount sort of like got cold feet. But how did the COVID situation help out or benefit Paramount and benefit this project?
I don't know if benefit is the right word. I think it allowed Paramount an opportunity to perhaps rethink what is apparently a $200 million budget after tax rebates for what is being described as a Western. I think they probably realized they didn't want to spend that kind of money on a movie that doesn't have like a transformer in it. So yeah, I guess they were seeking partners. The interesting about this thing about this Apple deal is that Paramount is still in the mix. Apple's financing, and they'll have I think North digital rights, but Paramount still has the global theatrical for this, so they're still involved. They're just not taking the big financial risk, and I mean, Apple has the money. The curious thing for me is getting their streaming service together. They ran into some creative. They butted heads with some creatives over the content of their TV shows or films.
Mm-hmm.
So Apple's, at least early on, their mandate was whatever's on their service, they want it to be broadly for all audiences. So that either means one of two things. Either they're stepping back from that mandate, or Killers of the Flower Moon is going to be a very different kind of Scorsese film, maybe something that's, maybe more PG-13 than rated R, maybe something a bit more classical. So that partnership is very, very interesting for me, for that reason.
I'm thinking of the scope and the vastness of The Revenant for this project. I read the book; it's quite good. Um, I I was looking back at the deal that they made for Greyhound, pumping 70 million. I mean, writing a check for 70 million, and they have shepherded on the rocks to a certain extent. Um, I think the situation with Apple is that they want instant um, clout. I think this is sort of like a huge way to assert that clout. I mean, they're getting a package that includes DiCaprio, that includes De Niro, regardless of what version we're seeing with the Eric Roth script. He's touched on some pretty large, encompassing, difficult to write projects with The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, The Good Shepherd, which was impossible to write, I imagine, and even Dune. So there's a lot going for this project, and yeah, I think there's clout for the project, but it also adds a little bit of clout to somebody who wants to measure up with the Netflixes of this world. And it was sort of paired with a film news release that's lasted over a couple of weeks. It was announced that Major Tom Cruise is repairing with a filmmaker that he's worked on 2014's Edge of Tomorrow and 2000 American Made. So let's just delve into the news, Kevin.
Sure. So Tom Cruise is going to space. Elon Musk, SpaceX is backing what will be called the first film shot, I guess, in outer space in some capacity. So very much in the Tom Cruise mold of doing something extreme. And yeah, Doug Liman is the director. So as you mentioned, he's had some successful collaborations, but to me, it is mind-boggling that what will certainly be an expensive uh, and probably a production that needs to be planned down to the last detail is being given to Doug Liman, who never in his career has shown any ability to like stay on budget, stay on schedule. I mean, even his last film, Chaos Walking, uh, it wrapped production in 2017, went back for reshoots, I think late 2018, early 2019, and it's still not released. It's currently scheduled for 2021, but who knows if that can will be kicked down the road again. So it boggles my mind. It frankly boggles my mind.
Well, for me, the whole project in itself, I was like, I'm thinking back to the Red Bull jump stunt by Philip Baumgartner. And actually, there was something out. I think it was this week or last week where they were going into the near miss or catastrophe with that jump. I don't know if you just watched it live, but I certainly did. So, I mean, Tom Cruise, I know he does his own stunts and hurts himself sometimes, but how can we even like the insurance costs alone to get him? And I'm sure the Church of Scientology are like they're looking at their pay meal and and I'm sure they're worried about this project. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, from that particular standpoint, it's a bit bonkers. But then again, he's done stuff in the Mission Impossible films that are equally life-threatening and dangerous. So I think at a certain point, he's either paying for his own own insurance, or whoever the insurers are like, well, he survived this much, like he's gonna be fine, I guess. But um, I don't know. I mean, who knows if Elon Musk's rocket will even make it out there, and what this whole production might look like. Listen, in the end, it could just be a nice PR stunt for Elon Musk. Like, who knows if this movie will ever even wind up in front of cameras? Because yeah, to me, it's one of those. It's a moonshot essentially for real. So we'll see. Tom Cruise likes to have a lot of things lined up sometimes, and they don't always work out.
I guess the key takeaway here is that if Eyes Wide Shut, if Eyes Wide Shut taught him anything, is that he can commit himself to a project on the long term, and just the G-force alone for something like this is gonna, yeah, he can't go method. He's gonna have to train for a long bit. On to our final topic. I think for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about all these auteurs jumping into series. And this week, I'm actually perplexed by this, to be quite frank. HBO Max are hungry for content, and A24 are moving more and more into television and feeling really comfortable. And so the Safdie brothers are looking to expand their form. And so there are no projects announced, but HBO Max are getting ready to work with the Safdies, and that includes um, the production company with Sebastian Baron-McLeod and the writing partner Ronald Bronstein. What was your sort of impressions or reactions when you saw that the Safdies are going to work with a larger canvas?
Good for them, frankly. I think it's really cool. I think they're at a stage in their career where they might have colleagues or friends or other filmmakers they want to support, and I think this might be a way to do it. I think my feeling is that they will act as they will probably conceive and executive produce a lot of either series or films, and then sort of let some other people take the reins and carry it forward.
Mm-hmm.
So they've always struck me as guys who have like an unending well of ideas, and I think this is a way for them to maybe get them out there. I view it similar, not dissimilar to sort of what the Duplass brothers have done with HBO over the years, with various series and like one-off things here and there. So I think it's a very interesting collaboration. I think, and A24's role is interesting as well. It shows they have a long-term commitment to these guys.
So yeah, I mean, like, heaven knows what good time Uncut Gems. I got a sense that they could have written the plot on a napkin, in a drunken stupor. Not to say that they're irresponsible. I mean, they're really nice guys. But yeah, I have difficulty imagining them working with something that's long form. I was much more enthused by the idea of them reworking like 80s cinema, like 48 hours thing. Got me pretty excited. But yeah, it's I just don't see it. I'm curious. I'm looking forward to them proving me right or wrong.
I don't know. I think you're underestimating them a little bit. I mean, even with the 48 hours thing, what was intriguing about that is that they had written a script for it, and apparently the direction it went in, it ended up being, they just realized this isn't a remake, this is something that's original. And don't forget, they also have projects set up over at Showtime with Nathan Fielder.
That's true.
So I think this is a really great way. Like, honestly, I would rather have like a couple things and have them now they have a place that they can just develop projects.
Mm-hmm.
If it means that we get a Safdie's brothers film sooner rather than later, and they have the sort of financial support to keep developing and keep working, I think it's a really good thing for them.
Well, one thing's for certain is that they're obsessed with cinema, and they're obsessed with the narrative. So looking forward to seeing who they choose as a DP. Is Darius Khani going to do TV? Who knows? But that concludes another episode of IndieSponge. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks a lot, man. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, and I'll see you next week for the Cannes unveiling. Cheers, guys. Hi, I'm Eric Lavallée. I'm editor-in-chief and site owner for IONCINEMA.com, and this is
Kevin Jagernauth, contributing writer for the playlist.
And together we are IndieSponge.